And now we are in item 10, use of the resources of the Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund. The adoption of the plan for the use of the resources of the fund on the basis of a proposal submitted by the 16th session of the committee is one of the main prerogatives of the General Assembly as per Article 25.4 of the Convention. Please refer to document 10, which can be read along with the information document INF.10. May I ask the Secretariat to present this item to us?
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. Good morning, dear Assembly. Allow me to start by saying that the Intangible Cultural Heritage Fund remains in a healthy state, with a balance of $8.7 million as of 31st December last year, which excludes the $1 million reserve fund. The fund is in a position to respond to the needs of states parties and communities. Regarding the use of the fund in the past biennium 2020-2021, detailed facts and figures are included in documents 10 and Inf 10. And for the interest of the time, so I would like to propose that the focus be given on the proposed plan for the use of the resources in 2022 and 2023, looking forward. Myself and colleagues, of course, remain available to answer any question that delegates may have on the implementation of the fund until 31st December last year. The proposed plan for the use of the resources of the fund is outlined in the annex of document 10. It covers a period of 24 months, 2022-2023, as well as the first 6 months of 2024. The budget for the first 6 months of 2024 corresponds to 1/4 of the budget for the period 22 and 23, as per our usual practice. Compared to the previous plan, the proposed plan largely follows the same distribution in terms of percentages for each budget line. However, the proposal contains some technical adjustments, which I will highlight when I reach the budget lines concerned. In line with the priorities of the fund, the majority of the resources would continue to be allocated to providing international assistance to states parties, and this is budget lines 1, 1.1, and 2. The combined percentage of these 3 lines represent 62.6%. Budget line 1 will be assigned once more with the majority of the allocation of the fund, which is 50%, while 10% would be allocated to budget line 1.1, which concerns the safeguarding, implementation, and monitoring team that Assembly has authorized to create. The first adjustment proposed in this plan concerns line 1, and it is a direct response to recommendations 5 and 6 from the 2021 IOS evaluation. The committee, in its decision of the 16-13, authorized the Secretariat to use part of this line on an experimental basis to cover the monitoring and evaluation costs of international assistance projects. These additional funds, separate from the grants allocated to the beneficiary states, will not exceed 10% of the approved budget for each project and would be managed directly by the Secretariat. They could, for instance, support the assistance of external experts to provide an independent evaluation of projects. Let me go to budget line 2 about preparatory assistance, which will slightly increase from 2% to 2.6%. This increase is linked to the global reflection on the listing mechanism that you have just seen, and this would allow the fund to be able to immediately implement the revised operational directives approved as I just said, under the item 9. And these concern the possibility for states to request assistance in the preparation of requests for the transfer of inscribed elements between the two lists of the Convention, as well as for inscription of elements on an extended or reduced basis. Budget line 3 about other functions of the committee will be maintained at 20% of the total budget approved. This line is dedicated to upstream work at the global level. Following the new approval procedure introduced by the committee in 2019, the percentage breakdown under this budget line 3 has been approved already by the 16th session of the committee last year. It is now presented to this assembly with a narrative description of the 4 expected results under this budget line, and this corresponds to paragraphs 24 to 31 of your document 10. Funds allocated to this budget line will be specifically dedicated to the improvement in the management of knowledge, information, and monitoring of the Convention, the capacity building program, the integration of ICH into development plans, policies, and these will be maintained in general at their respective percentages with slight adjustments based on the experience of the current biennium. Budget line 7 is about costs of advisory service to the committee, and it is proposed to be increased from 6% to 7.7%. Similar to budget line 2, the proposed increase is linked to the global reflection on the listing mechanism examined by the Assembly just now, and this would allow us to cover the additional costs associated with assessment by the evaluation body of an initial number of requests that Secretariat may receive in the near future for the transfer of inscribed elements between the two lists of the Convention, the inscriptions of elements on an extended or reduced basis, and the follow-up of inscribed elements. So those are the main points of the plan for 22-23, as well as the first 6 months of 24. Madam Chairperson, allow me to provide just a little additional information before ending my presentation. And I'm pleased to inform you of positive developments regarding support to the Convention since the beginning of this year. On behalf of the team, I would like to thank the International Information and Networking Center for Intangible Cultural Heritage in Asia-Pacific region, ISCAP, for an earmarked contribution in support of the capacity building program, an additional contribution to the regular program to support the MOOC on living heritage and sustainable development. The Sharjah Institute for Heritage in United Arab Emirates for an additional contribution to the regular program to support the rollout of the capacity building activities on periodic reporting in the Arab States region. Bulgaria for an additional contribution to undertake the renewal evaluation of the Regional Center for the Safeguarding of the Intangible Cultural Heritage in Southeastern Europe. The Government of Flanders, Belgium, for contribution through a funds in trust modality to support the safeguarding of intangible cultural heritage in basic education in Namibia and Zimbabwe. And finally, France and Lithuania for recent contributions to the sub-fund for enhancing the human capacities of the Secretariat. Let me underline that these contributions are particularly important to maintain the operations of the Secretariat because the total amount of contributions received in 2021 to the sub-fund corresponds to only 3.5% of the target endorsed by your Assembly in 2020, that was $950,000 per year. The Secretariat is very, very grateful to all these donors for their generous commitment in support to the work of the Secretariat, which will be duly acknowledged in future statutory reports. I have come to the end of my presentation, and I remain, of course, at your disposal to answer any questions, together with colleagues from the Bureau of Financial Management and the Bureau of Strategic Planning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fumiko, for that detailed presentation of the plan for the use of the resources of the fund covering the period 2022 to 2023. It is a very positive sign to see that the proposed plan would allow us to operationalize the outcomes of the global reflection on listing mechanisms and strengthen the monitoring and evaluation of international assistance projects. Before moving on to the adoption of the plan and the resolution, I propose to open a general debate and give the states parties the opportunity to ask their questions. I now open the floor. Does anybody wish to take the floor? Shall I call the first? Okay. Jamaica. Okay. I call on the Philippines. You have the floor.
Thank you for giving the Philippines the floor, Madam Chair. As a member of the Executive Board, the Philippines strongly advocates for further mainstreaming of data-driven and evidence-based approaches in UNESCO's programs and processes, particularly in ICH Secretariat's capacity to conduct monitoring and evaluation activities. We believe that this crucial aspect can further expand the ability of our living heritage in shaping a prosperous and sustainable future for all people. Mindful of the Convention's limited resources, the Philippines strongly supports the ICH Secretariat's proposal to increase its human resources to focus on the monitoring and evaluation aspect of its initiatives. Moreover, as the ICH expands its intersectoral work, the Philippines also proposes to explore the inclusion of the International Decade of Ocean Science as a priority area, in addition to the International Decade for Indigenous Languages that is already mentioned in the document. With this, the Philippines wishes to emphasize the importance of diversity and equitable geographical contribution in the selection of staff with a firm adherence to UNESCO's required competencies. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next on the list are Austria, Netherlands, and Jamaica. After this, we are going to close the list. And Austria, you have the floor.
Thank you. Please let us renew our appreciation of the Secretariat's work here. Noting in the budget that the expenditure is on the decrease is no reason for concern for us. Very obviously, this is largely linked to the effects of the COVID pandemic. We are pleased to see the fund in a stable and healthy state. The guidelines for the use of the resources of the funds in paragraph 66 and 67 of the operational directives determine that a large majority of the resources be allocated to providing international assistance to states parties to supplement their national efforts to safeguard intangible cultural heritage. This refers to budget lines 1, 1.1 and 2, and this is clearly given in the proposed budget on the table in front of us by about 62%. Having said that, for us it is important also to maintain the allocation of budget line 1 at the level as high as possible to enable states parties to strengthen their safeguarding efforts. However, unfortunately, in recent years, this budget line has continuously been reduced, and for the first time, it does no longer comprise the majority of the funds. If we compare the figures, in 2016-17, we had 59% going to budget line 1. In 2018-19, it was 52.55%. In 2020 and 21, it was 51.96%, and now in 22-23, it is for the first time 50%. The increase of the budget lines in 2 and 7 is meant to cover the additional costs that may arise from the implementation of the outcomes from the global reflection on the listing mechanisms. Furthermore, new costs arise for the monitoring and evaluation of international assistance projects by external experts on an experimental basis, as we have just heard. In this context, we would like to inquire what costs from the outcomes of the global reflection on the listing mechanisms are taken from the ICH fund. As we had it since the early days of the convention, we assume that the inscription process of element is covered by the regular budget, not affecting the fund.
Madam, excuse me, may I request you to conclude, please?
Sorry?
To conclude.
Okay.
Thank you.
May I continue?
Yes, please.
So the question is it only the preparatory assistance for the transfer requests that is covered by the fund? Thank you.
Thank you. Netherlands, pardon. Netherlands, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to echo the statements and the questions of the colleague from Austria. The distribution of the budget often show where the priorities lie. We are pleased to see that in accordance to Article 66 and 67 of the Operational Directive, the majority of the resources are allocated to providing international assistance and activity that directly improve safeguarding connection to social, environmental and educational areas. We would like to state that from our perspective, the purpose of the convention is best served by prioritizing point 1 and 3 of the draft plan. The Netherlands also welcomes the priority that is given to monitoring and evaluating international assistance programs. We would like to call upon the Secretariat to publish the results of these activities whenever possible into public-oriented content. It is clear that the ongoing discussion about the listing system and the financial and human resources needed for it is inseparably linked to the other activities and the funding of the convention. The consequence of strengthening the listing system is that more assistance is needed from the Secretariat, which means that more budget will go to the list. And that means that in terms of percentages, less budget goes to the other activities. This development is already visible in this proposal and in the last 10 years, like Austria mentioned. And this is a development to keep a close eye on in further discussions. The Netherlands supports the draft decision. However, we would like to add that we believe that the current step of the percentage-wise redistribution in the direction of the list should stop at this point. And, for the last time, the list is a means, not an end. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Jamaica, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Madam President. Jamaica notes that this convention will soon come of age, celebrating as it will next year 20 years of successful and continuously evolving operation. We renew our commendations of the work of the Secretariat. Jamaica supports the suggestions put forward to allocate funds by percentage. We endorse an approach that sees resources directed to specific projects in areas of greatest need and impact. In this regard, we underscore, among other important UNESCO priorities, the needs of small island developing states regarding safeguarding ICH heritage, which remain particularly vulnerable to natural disasters. A threat increased exponentially with climate change, and also Priority Africa. We appreciate and support the use of funds to undergird strategies to increase the responsiveness of the Secretariat generally, and more specifically, to better support state parties in their national efforts to safeguard ICH. We underscore the importance of addressing the imbalance of representation of NGOs by region through use of the fund to provide capacity development training. We also endorse as necessary allocations to increase capacity to monitor and evaluate projects. Jamaica welcomes the overall changes, which will allow for needed funds to be more readily accessed, delivered in a timely manner, and managed with efficiency and accustomed accountability. We commend the flexible, facilitatory, and innovative ethos for administering the fund. Jamaica appreciates the prospect of access to expert advice prior to submissions and like strategies, and welcomes the development of thematic initiatives, including actions on safeguarding ICH in formal and informal education and ICH in emergencies. Jamaica commends state parties for contributions, including the voluntary contributions, and we commend the Secretariat for good management of the fund. Regrettably, we have seen reported decreases, and we look forward to not only returning to the usual pace, but accelerating how interventions are actually
Madam,
made.
I would have to request you to conclude.
Thank you
Sorry.
very much, Madam President.
Thank you. And now the last speaker in the list, because we have closed, absolutely the list is closed now, is Chad. Chad, you have the floor. So Chad is not speaking? Okay. We have several questions addressed to the Secretariat from the floor, and I give the floor now to the Secretariat to respond.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the comments and questions. I have noted principally 3 questions, 2 from Austria and 1 from the Netherlands. Basically, the proposal that we made is to keep up with the development of the convention, and in this particular case, the decision that you have just taken on the reflection, following the reflection on the global reflection on listing mechanisms, for example, and to be able to implement immediately certain things that are going to be effected under the new system. So to answer to one of the questions from Austria, the budget line 2 foresees under the preparatory assistance, both to be able to cover the issue of the transfer from the representative list to the USL, but also the extension of an inscribed element. So both all the packages that the new system have foreseen are covered by this proposal. Also, concerning the international assistance, the amount attributed to this line, of course, it is 50%. But if you look also at the 1.1, the subline, the 10% for the team that will be supporting this mechanism, then the overall amount, overall percentage is quite high at 60%, so that we believe that we continue to be able to service all states, parties, and communities through this international cooperation mechanism that is very important under the Convention. The question posed by the Netherlands about the need to publish the activities that will be undertaken by the Secretariat on monitoring and evaluation, point really very well taken. This is for us a very important step towards further operationalizing the international assistance mechanism. You may recall that under 2018 and 19 biennium, an expenditure rate for this line has increased quite significantly, and obviously with the COVID, we are experiencing a little bit of a setback, but we hope to be able to catch up. And then at the same time, to build a very robust, ground-based monitoring mechanism to be able to understand the impact of the international assistance that is being provided. And of course, that will be duly reported to the governing bodies of the Convention. I thank you, ADG, and the Chairperson.
Thank you, Fumiko. I believe that the General Assembly is ready to consider draft Resolution 9G810, but let us start with the adoption of the plan as contained in the annex of Document 10, which will be on the screen. May I ask the Assembly to adopt Resolution 9.GA10 as shown on the screen? Seeing no objection?
You have to go first for.
Oh, sorry.
Wait. No,
The plan.
because you're here. That's it.
Okay. Sorry, I jumped again. Apologies. And now this is the correct thing to say. The Secretariat already gave us a detailed presentation of each line. Is there any objection? I see none. Adopted. And then we move on to the adoption of the resolution. Please refer to draft resolution document 10 on screen. I suggest that we adopt it as a whole, as there has been no suggestions or recommendations for revisions. Are there any objections? Seeing no objections, it's adopted.